favor? Decided to approve the agendas. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Third item, vote to approve March meeting minutes.
Second.
So moved and seconded to approve the March meeting minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. I go ahead and introduce the next item here. Okay, so next we have a catch up in my packet. Presentation from DART on Reimagine DART. Who's here to speak to that? Is that you, Tony? Yep. All right, floor is yours.
All right. So good morning. My name is Tony Filippini. I'm the planning manager with DART. What I want to go through today, we're really kicking off our first major public involvement period, month of April, for our Reimagine DART effort. For our group in particular, I want to really focus on the methodology and where we're at in these steps. I'm going to slide through quite a few slides that we have this morning to not keep us for too long. But on that, I do want to mention all the graph charts I'm going to show you are available in a pretty lengthy report that's available on our website. That link is in the packet. It's reimaginedartdsm.com. So there's certainly a lot of that is in there if you want to go back, go over some things in a little more detail, look at those maps in a little bigger venue on your screen. Some of these might come out a little bit tricky to see. But I'm going to let me get started, run through these slides. Happy to take any questions too as we get into it. So really what we're doing here, Reimagine DART is an effort to really reimagine what transit service looks like in the Des Moines Metro. DART's been around since 2006. The network hasn't changed a whole lot. And I think we know through the work that we've been doing and how transportation has changed with technology, and then COVID certainly has its impacts on how people travel, that it's really time to rethink how transit is being used because we certainly see shifts in our own area. And so that's really what we're doing in this effort. There's really kind of two things. So I'm going to start just to acknowledge that budgets are important. Budgets are what allows you to do how much of something. And we recognize that there's going to be a lot of different things that relates to how much budget there is. What everybody should be walking through is just sort of a status quo, thinking about what it would look like if we had the same resources as today. But we recognize that the future is unknown. It might be smaller, it might be bigger, it's probably going to be smaller. So that's going to be sort of the next thing that we think about, how much we're going to do. Before we get into the how much question, it's what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And so we're going to walk through with the community during the month of April is to have a discussion of what does success look like for DART. I think one of the things that's really important is that there's not really a right answer. And so that's what we're walking through. You can do it in different ways, you get different results to do it, and what makes sense for our community as a whole. And so just as a general timeline, a little weird on that, but we're starting our public input on the concepts. This is sort of the, what's important to you, our goal to get high ridership, where's the coverage, I'll walk through that. Once we get that information, we'll be sharing that with the DART Commission. They'll be making some decisions on how we allocate that service, and then how much funding will be available to provide the services that we want to have. So that will be in the summer. April is that conversation. So I'm going to go through that ridership coverage conversation that we're going to have with the community this month. First and foremost, we are working with Jared Walker Associates as our private consultant. Their really primary consulting business that they do is with redesigns. And so they have a lot of experience throughout the United States and internationally in doing this kind of work. Something that they're very strong about in their methodology when they work with communities is that, their mission is to foster clear conversations about transit. And what that means is they're not flying in, putting a map together, and telling us this is what you should do, and then leaving. There are technical staff really for this. And they're making it very clear for us to identify what is right for us. And so they've done a lot of work on the back end to help us sort of evaluate what those differences are. So really the big question is how do we allocate resources? I'll just go so a real quick transit primer on transit planning, but this is a fictional town. And what we know is we have a limited number of buses that we have. This is our budget more or less. So there's 18 buses in this area. Each line is a road and then each dot is a person. And you can sort of see in this area, there's two major corridors. About 70% of this area lives on those two corridors. So we can do one thing to really say, to maximize how much ridership we get, we'll put all those buses on those two major streets. It's really frequent service. 70% of the town has great connections to each other. And so it's running every 10 minutes. And that can be really good. That's high ridership. But there's some problems, we see down here on the sort of in the corner here, they're really far away. And so 30% of this town doesn't have transit service. And depending on who lives there or what kind of parts of the community that is, that might not be our goal. It might be important that we serve them. And so if ridership is less important, we really need to make sure that everyone gets covered somehow. We still only have 18 buses. So what we could do is just have a lot more routes, spread those buses out. They're not going to be as convenient now. Everyone's going to have some access to it, but the buses are not going to come as often. Less people are probably going to use it. It's a lot less useful for the people on these major corridors because instead of every 10 minutes, maybe they're every hour now. And there's other ways that they could probably get to where they need to go faster. And so, they're achieving two different goals with that same pot of money. And so what we're doing is having this conversation is what's really important here. Each one has their own values. The ridership goal is so what we hear a lot. The most amount of people on the bus. It's sort of cheaper by per person to do it that way. And that's where you get your congestion savings, your sustainability goals get covered in that one. But then the goal, the coverage goal, that's our access for all. That's our being able to support all parts of the community in all the different forms, make sure that everyone has some sort of access to something. But really, one of the things to acknowledge is the more you do of one, the less you can do of other, because you still have the same amount of money. And as we sort of showed through that example, you can't really have both. And so the one thing that I'll kind of acknowledge here too is we're presenting this in high contrast. We're doing as much on one side and as much on the other to show as much as we can how they're different, but it is a spectrum. You can land somewhere in the middle. And so what we've done with our consultants, Jarrett Walker, is to basically take all the resources we have today, not a dollar more, not a dollar less, and say, well, if our goal is high ridership, how would we spend all of that? If our goal is high coverage, how would we do it differently? So I'll walk through some of that and the analysis that's been done behind it. Just to sort of set our minds for how the report's set up and how we're communicating. Everything's color coded and it's really color coded by frequency. So the deep red is that every 15 minutes, very frequent service. On this map, purple is 20 minutes, dark blue is 30, light blue is 60 minutes. This is our current network. We also have a bunch of brown, I guess I'll call it, all mostly in the outside parts of the metro. And this is a peak only. So this is a service that we've done for decades, really oriented towards commuters, primarily downtown Des Moines. These operate just Monday through Friday, sort of in the morning peak and the afternoon peak, and that's it. So it's very limited. So our first concept, ridership, is quite a bit different. So like in that first fictional example, we really try to put all of the resources in the places that are the highest transit propensity, high density, a lot of the demographics that are more transit conducive, and then have land uses that are diverse and good for transit. What you'll see in these reports is that there's a lot more red lines. We've got 15-minute routes. There's quite a few routes that are 30 minutes. And then there are some 60-minute routes as well. And then in our coverage concept, it changes quite a bit in the sense that we're just down to sort of two smaller red routes, a lot more than blue ones. And then we're also introducing microtransit zones, primarily in the suburban communities as a way for coverage. So this is where, instead of allocating all the resources on really transit favorable areas, this is spreading it out as much as we can to cover as much of the metro as possible. Another item that I do want to kind of cover too is microtransit. So it's kind of a newer thing that's being added in. And there's also a spectrum of ways to operate microtransit. Just to sort of walk through a little example here, we've got another little fictional town in which this was really our fixed route. You've got one major street, that's where the bus goes. There's bus stops, people walk to them. So the buses just go in a straight line, picking up people when they're there. There's another way to do it, and this is what we're piloting up in Ankeny, called the Ankeny On Demand. And this is where the bus will go anywhere that someone calls for it. And so really now every street is more or less a street a bus can go down, pick up wherever they're at, and then take them to where they want to go. There are ways you can, so I'll just get to a little bit of the fundamentals here. We were talking about efficiency. Fixed route can do what we're seeing today. Our buses do between 10 to 35 riders per hour. It's pretty efficient. This sort of setup for microtransit, it's a lot harder to be that efficient. At the best, you can get 5 riders per hour. We do just over 3.5 right now in Ankeny. And this is because it just takes a while to drive to someone's house, have them board, and then drive them to where they're going, and then start that over again. You can also do things somewhat in the middle. In the past, DART, probably about 15 years ago, had flex routes. This is where you still have a fixed route, but it will deviate upon request to very specific spots. And then there's also sort of the sweet spot that this is sort of what we're looking at for this coverage concept, where we don't go down every street, but we'll go down through most of the major roads in a community, so that you might have to walk a couple of blocks maybe to get to a major street, so that we can avoid going into cul-de-sacs or areas that are hard to get to. And that will just sort of help that service be a little bit faster, pick up more people per hour. And so just like everything else, it's a choice on what kind of service you're providing. There's some other things that we're communicating with the public here is really the weekday versus the weekend. As I mentioned, we have a lot of peak service on the weekday, and our services are very different on a Monday through Friday versus on a Sunday is our example here. It's a lot less frequent. It's mostly hourly on Saturday and Sunday. On both of these examples, because the way things are changing, it's really a 7-day-a-week model. And so these services are running as presented all day, 7 days a week at that frequency. So those 15-minute routes in the ridership model are Monday through Friday, as well as Saturday and Sunday. And then likewise for the coverage model, it's sort of the same thing. The routes are doing the same frequency on weekdays as they are on weekends, with the exception of the microtransit, which would, for the budget that we currently have, would just be Monday through Friday. And so what we're working with Jared Walker Associates is sort of like what does that mean to the average person if you think about it in your day-to-day life? There's a number of analysis that we can do. Really the goal here is transit is opportunity to get to places. And so we want to measure how far can you go in 45 minutes, which is pretty reasonable for an area where I think most people think I can get most places 20 minutes in my car, 45 minutes on a bus. It's probably about the maximum that we want to think about that's reasonable. And so we can look at different places here. Just an example, we picked Polk County Workplace. This is how far you get in our existing network in 45 minutes. And we can overlay it with the ridership concept. Because it's more frequent to more places, you can get a bit further of a distance. And then we can lay them over each other and see that, there's areas in just dark green. These are new access places in that ridership concept. There are some areas in gray that would be washed. And that's really just because of the way the network is designed. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But what we can do is we can measure what kind of access you have here. And so, when we compare the two between our current and the ridership concept, there's 18% more jobs in that dark green area versus the gray, and also 32% more residents. And so that's 32% more households that could theoretically get to Polk County River Place. Likewise, we did the same sort of thing for the coverage concept. So that's in dark green, the coverage, and then again overlaid with what we currently do in the gray. It's a little bit different. There's some trade-offs at some parts. Again, that's just part of the network design there. This one has a very sort of marginal trade-off here. The coverage, the jobs are a little bit more, 7% more residents as well. But we've also done this analysis for the entire metro. And so these maps again might be easier to read if you look up the report, but there's dots all over the metro. And it's really measuring the change in access to these two concepts. And so you'll see that there's areas that have are losing some because we're consolidating routes and focusing on more transit areas on this ridership concept. And then there's certain areas that are darker green. Likewise, we did I might have some more. Oh, and so what we're able to do is the whole sort of metro-wide calculation on this. And so this average resident gets 23% more jobs in that ridership concept. Likewise, we did something in coverage as well. It looks quite a bit different. This one definitely sooner read on your screen on a report. But there's certainly areas that are much more brown, which is a decrease. What is a little bit harder to see is there's light green really all over the north, sort of the further parts of the metro, and that's where those microtransits are introduced. That's really adding new access that doesn't exist today. And so that's to sort of show that there's some, that these are just trade-offs that we can add in areas, but there might be areas that just have different access to things because it takes longer to get places. This shows a 9% job loss in sort of the metro, but again, just looking at that 45 minutes, not that they would be inaccessible, they'll just take longer than 45 minutes to get there. We've also been able to do this analysis, not only just the average resident, also some subgroups. So there's some additional analysis in the report. We can do that calculation for low-income residents, households without cards, and then also residents of color. And you can see they have different impacts on all of them. One of the big things to point out is it adds a lot of, it can add a lot of service for the weekend when I introduced those concepts. We would add a lot of service that we don't have today. And so really in both of these concepts, they go up quite a bit. Another way that we can measure it is by how many people are near transit. And so we do have analysis between these concepts of how many people live near the existing network. So overall, 44% with 4% by frequent service, a lot. But the ridership concept, we trade down. We get more frequency, but less people are by it. And then the coverage concept, a lot more people are by it, almost just 67%. And the frequent network is about comparable to today. And then again, that weekend, you see quite a bit of an increase because, it's almost hourly all day today. And those concepts are 7 day a week. And so you do have a lot more frequent service on the weekend than both concepts here. And so generally speaking, we're doing this presentation with the public and a lot of stakeholders through the month of April. And really it's getting to this question. Which one resonates with you? Which one is success for the community? What should we be focusing on? The ridership idea or the coverage? And then recognizing that it is a spectrum. There's a couple of different ways. It's not one or the other. So we do have in our survey, I'm strongly on one side, I'm leaning toward one side, kind of in the middle, and then also the same to the other. And so, there's There's no, again, no right answer, no wrong answer. It's really about what matters to our community. We're also asking a couple other questions that are aligned with these changes. Waiting versus walking, it's sort of that same trade-off. In the coverage model, there's more routes, but they come less often. You're probably closer to one, but you're waiting for the bus longer. Or would you be, the preference would be, I would walk a little bit further and then the bus is just sort of always coming, which is more that ridership concept. Likewise, we're also asking about bus stop spacing. This one's a little more simple, the further apart they are, the less stopping the bus is doing, the faster you go. And so what we do have, we have a website. We've got the primary thing that we're taking is survey. So we've got those questions, and then there's also just a couple of fill in the blank. Are there anything in the concept you really like? Are there anything in the concept you absolutely hate? And we're really taking all that feedback that we're going to share with the commission in early May at our commission meeting. And then they'll be considering really sort of setting the standard on what they prefer and what they're going to direct staff to design and on May 19th. And that's also when they're going to be considering what kind of a budget they want us to design a draft network on. Which, just sort of add again, I don't think I ever said it, but these are concepts, not proposals. These are going to help us understand what we're going to design for later on this summer based on the feedback that we get. And so that's something that's really important that we continuously tell our the public that we meet with them. We had our first meeting last night, and just to remind them, these are the routes that are going in. These aren't the proposals. These are to get an idea. And some people really hate them. Some people think there's some really cool stuff in it. So happy to take any questions if there are any. Certainly, the website has there's certainly a lot more information and maps in that report if you're interested in that.
I'll ask more questions.
Yeah.
Is this something that you plan on revisiting every 5 years or?
I guess I don't know the answer to that. I would probably not, I would think this one would probably be longer than that. Yeah, generally speaking, the community grows quite a bit, and maybe there's some really big budget changes. It could be something we need to visit sooner than later. But because this is a really big change, we sort of expect it to sort of be in place for a bit and then work with our community on sort of land use decisions and improvement decisions to sort of build this as a foundation going forward.
Tony, where you compared the jobs, especially for like a weekend, especially, is that considering jobs that are only open on weekends?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is it all jobs?
Yeah, I don't know if I specifically know the answer to that. I'm gonna guess that it's just all jobs in general. I know a lot for the transit customers that we are currently providing for, those are 7-day-a-week jobs, quite a bit of service jobs. And so it's a bit more anticipating that it's 7-day kind of job market.
Anybody online questions or? Anyone else? Thank you, Tony.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Next item on our list is a report and a vote on our EC list. And is Gunnar here? Okay, Dylan's got it then.
Thanks. We have before you the annual DC list that we put together before the partnerships trip, which happens May 7th through 9th this year. We've shopped this around a little bit, asked for feedback, and I know there has been updates made to that list. And I know, Steve, you had something just yesterday that we've updated. So that was reflected in the printout that was on the table before everybody. It might not be reflected in the agenda you have before you, though. What we want to do is just make sure that anything that community has an application for, whether that's you're seeking funding through a build program, appropriations, anything like that, that's kind of stuff, anything that you would have to go to DC that they are making decisions on and for a discretionary program. Those are the kinds of things we just want to be aware of. So when we are in the room talking to them, we can make sure that we're advocating for it. A little bit of a wrinkle this year is we have situations like what's happening with Des Moines, where they've received a Safe Streets for All grant, but that grant has not yet been executed because of all the federal kind of turmoil. So those are the other things we want to know too. So that's really what we want that list to include if possible. We're asking for your approval of that list today. We'll take that to the to the full policy committee next week, and then we'll use that on our trip. But there is definitely still time to make some adjustments to that. But that I happy to address any questions.
You need our project on there twice.
If it's on there twice, no, we don't need to. We'll fix that.
It's a lot of money. It helps us. Working twice as hard to get more money.
Double decker road.
Dylan, which two projects were removed?
I can't tell you exactly which two projects were removed. I can look into it, but I know that there were a few on there that were just carryovers from last year that the community said take those off.
Okay, thank you.
If we need to correct program funding, we just need to send that note to you or Gunner then.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Just let us know.
Do you want, we have projects, they're not specifically transportation related, but they are held up with federal funding right now. I mean, I don't want to muddy the waters of the transportation focus, but we also have projects that aren't getting federal funding. It's just maybe not the purview of this group.
Right. That gets into a gray area. I would say probably let's keep it transportation as you said, but if you want to let us know, we can always try to squeeze it in while we're there. Because this goes into the partnerships like transportation section of their policy book. So yeah.
Anybody online and in person have any other questions? If not, we need these votes will need a motion to approve it. I'll second it. All right, it's been moved and seconded with changes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Next, we have a report on the federal fiscal year 2029 funding recommendations for the SDBG and TAP awards.
As well.
Okay.
So as everyone's probably aware, the funding subcommittee has gone through the funding programs. We did presentations on March 12th as well as March 23rd. Anyway, we did the presentations on those dates. There was about $18.6 million in SDBG funds and 1.8 million or so in TAP funds for our targets. If you flip forward, we can show you there the projects that are recommended for funding from the funding subcommittee. Those are the ones that have a recommended award there in that far right columns that includes Ankeny, Dart, Des Moines, Pleasant Hill, Urbandale, West Des Moines, and Windsor Heights for the SDBG programs. One thing I'll point out is that for most of the program or most of the projects that received funding, the committee really tried to give the full request amount. I think the only exceptions to that are the ones for Dart, as well as I think it's on the next page, one of the bridge programs for the city of Des Moines. There on the top, you can see bridge program requests for Des Moines and Polk County. Now you can see that Des Moines got a little bit less than what their funding request was. And then finally at the bottom there, we had a couple of other ones, study for the interchange on I-80 for Altoona and Bondurant around the Mitchellville area too. And then some funding that comes for data licensing and so forth to the MPO. I'll point out there too that there's a $200,000 that's flexed from the SDBG program to the TAP program. So then if you switch to the next page, you can see the TAP awards. And again, tried to make sure that all the communities received the full funding request. So Bondurant, Des Moines, Polk City, and Waukee. Those were the recommendations made by the funding subcommittee. This will go on the next week's agenda for the policy committee for a review, not for approval yet. So it'll come back for approval in May. So if there are any questions, comments, anything that you think needs to be addressed or reviewed or anything, let us know. And we can make sure we take that and make the policy committee aware of that. But for right now, that's what the request is. For the recommendations, I should say.
If there are no questions, we'll continue. Thanks, Dylan. Next item is a report on safe streets and roads, notice funding opportunity and application. Marcus has this one.
Thank you. So, as we expected, it was released in March, or at least we had hoped. The due date for it is June 26th. This is just kind of an overview of what all is available. There was a change related to our total amount, which I think had carried over from previous cycles. So the max award is 25 million. They're expecting somewhere between 40 to 70 implementation grants to be supported, mostly because they're kind of thinking that lower range of awards. The performance period is somewhere between 12 months and 5 years. They also noted that their goal is to get agreements executed within 12 months of award notification. So we'll see if that happens based on current experience. And then applicants who have never received federal funding are encouraged to partner with them. So it's kind of some initial highlights. Match requirements, as expected, the 20% minimum local match for eligible projects. There's a list of different types of in-kind matching that's eligible to be considered match. And then there's some additional details on the website and these slides about eligible expenses. So planning, design, development of projects, strategies that are included in the action plan are eligible. Infrastructure projects, including environmental review, design and construction, and then non-infrastructure strategies, including education enforcement, policy changes, post-crash care, all eligible. So what does that mean? So some, construction of projects that we've identified as key corridors, best practices that we've identified as countermeasures can all be included as eligible expenses. Ineligible expenses would be projects that are primarily used for roadway expansion or capacity growth. That would not be eligible just because the funding is focused on safety. So the priorities for the program, again, low cost, high impact strategies with the geographic spread. So how can we create the broadest impact for safety? Equitable investment in underserved urban and rural communities. Evidence-based projects and strategies. So they want you to really tie it back to the data analysis and the action plan that you provide. And then engagement with a variety of stakeholders, which we have a pretty good record of showing that throughout the project, as well as kind of getting prepped for the grant application. So priorities, again, we're targeting, corridors that we've identified in our plan as on the high injury network or in the high risk network. And those are going to be really where we want to focus and make sure that we're targeting projects. And that's kind of what they'll tie it to is, are we looking at the data analysis that we did, putting forward projects that address concerns for safety? So the criteria, safety needs, safety impact, engagement, supplemental planning and demonstration activities, which is an optional element of an implementation grant, and then project readiness. So we'll need to show that there's some planning, design, development of the project so that it can move forward and be implemented within that window of 5 years. So other considerations are shown there. I think the one that is probably most important as we're thinking about things, they do include this item about underserved communities, which again, they've refocused on areas of persistent poverty as their definition of underserved communities, which align fairly well with our EJ areas. And then so they may maximize the awards, or prioritize awards to those who have not received implementation grants before. So there might be some additional conversations with the city of Des Moines about how do we want to make sure that we balance your implementation grant award with what we're proposing as we move forward with project selection and prioritization. Same with like Grimes and the Highway 141 study. We'll have cognizant of that moving forward. So just some of the schedule on the development of the grant application. So before April 25th, we plan to have meetings with member communities. What we'll do there is we'll discuss those project sheets that you provided us with your priorities, your recommendations on what school related projects you want to do. So if you have not completed those, please do that and get those sent back in so that we can start consolidating all that information prior to these meetings. Between April 25th and May 9th, we'll start putting together a project list of primarily based on priorities for communities, and then looking at kind of readiness and how well those align with the high entry network and high risk networks. And then we'll make sure that we have support for the list of projects and for the match of those. Grant writing will start May 12th through June 20th will be the bulk of the work. The plan will be to develop that list of projects, then bring it back to the technical committee for review and conversation about that. There will be a link in the post-meeting email with dates and times for you to sign up for a meeting with myself and the consultant team to discuss that project sheet and your priority projects. So please be on the lookout for that and select times that work best for your schedule. Any questions currently?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll apply for the grant as an MPO with different member communities, and then do we work out an agreement on how do we pay the local share on that, or who administers the overall project?
Yeah, so currently what we're thinking is we'll have the joint application as the MPO, and that the MPO will probably administer the grant award. We'll have to figure out, how the match comes in and gets distributed, or how it gets paid by communities. That will be part of the conversations as we move forward with.
Same with are we doing, would we let our own, I guess that's the DOT, but citywide projects or is an MPO giant project?
If it's like the list of projects and it's city specific, we'll probably lean back on the cities to work through the process and coordinate with the DOT on making sure that lighting and everything is on schedule. There are a few ideas that we're kicking around for region-wide projects, mostly studies at this point, that we haven't fully vetted internally as staff even. So I think those will be part of the conversations as we move forward with project selection as well. Just kind of what does this look like and how prepared are each of the communities to move forward with matches, funding, and all that.
They treat those as separate projects, or all as the MPO has one that they're sending for that funding limits and stuff?
It'll be all one. If it's the MPO's grant, it would be our max award would be 25 million. So we would just whatever we get for projects and come up with the costs for those. We'll just try to see what we can do to it. We don't necessarily need to hit that max 25 million, but if that's what we end up at, that's where we're capped. So.
Okay, hearing no other questions. Thanks, Marcus. It looks like you have the next item too, multimodal economic impact study.
Yep. So we just wanted to give you a quick update, very quick update on the multimodal economic impact study. We got it kicked off last month. Yeah, last month with Metro Analytics. The first major push is a lot of data collection. They have the model, our traffic demand model. Some of the outputs from that, they've done some collection on economic impact for the region. They've purchased InPlan, which provides a lot of their economic data, and they're currently working on the first two tasks related to the project, which is this multimodal transportation contribution and dependency analysis, which kind of gives us a baseline of, based on where we're at for funding and what we're spending and the economic impacts the economics that are generated, what's our baseline? And then they're also working on task two, which is this transit contribution efficiency, which feeds off of that first task, just focused on the transit benefit. So we wanted to share with you this schedule, which is of course small and hard to see on screen here, but it lays out kind of the timelines for things. Somewhere end of April, early May, we'll get the first deliverable, which is that first report for task one. There will also be a workshop with some elected officials who sit on both the MPO policy board and the DART commission to kind of build an understanding of what is this study and what is the output going to look like and how is it going to best be used. So that's an education piece. And then we're also working on a time that would be available for the technical committee and technical staff to also join and kind of learn more details from the consultant team on what's going into this analysis, what should be the output, how will you be able to use it. So once we have that date set up, we'll put that in an email. Otherwise, there's going to be other opportunities to engage with the study. There's a couple of in-person presentations that the consultant team will give. We'll kind of align with deliverable dates. And then there will be another workshop later summer as we get closer to actually getting the final product of the dashboard and kind of what does the dashboard do? How can we utilize it? How can communities utilize it? But currently we're kind of in the data gathering processing phase of the study. So any initial questions on that? We'll have this kind of a reoccurring item as needed to give updates on different pieces of deliverables.
Excellent. Thanks, Marcus. Next, Addison, I guess the next two items. First one is the transportation improvement plan for federal fiscal years 2026 through 2029.
All right, good morning, everyone. I have this boilerplate tip slide here reminding you that we're kicking off the development of the 4-year TIP Transportation Improvement Program. We will be sending out today or tomorrow those TIP status reports, so requesting information on projects that I have in TPMS at the moment. That will include the recommended funds from the funding subcommittee as well for new projects or already previously existing projects. So you can expect that email from me later today or tomorrow. Hoping to get information back from you at the end of the month. And then just a reminder of where we're at in the process for developing the TIP. We'll be updating that project list this month, have that completed by the end of April, and then begin developing the draft TIP 2026 through 2029 to have that completed by July. Happy to take any questions about that right now. Otherwise, you can just expect an email from me today or tomorrow.
The idea we're doing for funding levels beyond 26.
Well, this was a conversation that the funding subcommittee had as well, is we are, they just awarded funds for 29, knowing that anything past 26, 27, like you're saying, is beyond the reauthorization bill. So we don't exactly know. There might be there's the subcommittee discussed, do we just hold tight and not award funds next year and see how things settle, whether there's a reauthorization bill, what funding levels are, and then we can work multiple years at once. So that might be where we're going, but we have until December to figure out what the MPO's funding process will look like. But that's some of the early conversations they've had.
GC last week and all the comments that made was that they don't see earmark type money becoming funding levels. They don't know if that means that the funding level will all go to formulaic type money or it'll be discretionary money or whether the overall amount will drop. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, there's, at least on the funding subcommittee, there was I wouldn't say a complete divide, but there was a spectrum of people saying we shouldn't be doing anything because who knows what's going to happen, and others going, there's no way we're going to possibly pull all the funding away. So
It won't be all.
but I think it's going to be changes. I wouldn't anticipate the carbon reduction program being renewed. So we've already awarded more than what's authorized. So that might be something we have to pull back. So there's several things we're watching.
Any other questions? Thanks, Marcus. And next you have the pavement forecasting update.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to provide a brief overview and reminder of the value that we hope to bring with our roadway pavement condition forecasting. So we utilize the DTIMS asset management software out of Intrans to project future pavement conditions. That's based on unit costs, based on the different approaches that communities take to their pavement management programs, their budgets, their anticipated budgets, the PCIs, so on and so forth. And so the value that we hope to bring with our pavement condition forecasting is to inform our MPO members on what their payment may look like, given those methodologies, unit costs, and budgets years out into the future, what roadway conditions will look like. And so what we need now and have needed is input from TTC members to set up the methodology and ensure that even though we're hoping to provide a comprehensive regional view, that those averages for methodologies for unit costs are roughly reflecting the realities on the ground in the majority of municipalities. So MPO staff distributed a survey earlier this year in 2025. We got a lot of good info from that, and as well as from some interviews with members from the technical committee. But there were wide variations in the unit cost responses in that survey, likely due to some ambiguity about what constitutes a major preservation project, what constitutes minor rehab, and so on. So we're sending out another survey included in your packet. It can be sent to you individually as well if you encounter any issues accessing it. And we're just looking to receive feedback or alternative propositions for estimates of average unit costs for specific roadway treatments. The estimates provided in that Google form are based on previous survey responses, consultation with Intrans, and some inflation-adjusted values from DTIMS from previous pavement forecasting reports. So that form has been provided for you digitally in your packet today. So please use that form, provide us with comments, propose alternative unit costs. We're hoping to get that feedback within by Wednesday, April 23rd. And one thing we're really hoping to see with that is, do we have a justification for splitting up the forecasting on a rural urban basis? Because that was something that came out of the initial survey that might explain the wide variation. Is there very different unit costs for a rural community compared to an urban community? So that's one of the goals, objectives for redistributing the survey. Happy to explain it further or take any questions now.
I do have a question. You say unit cost, I mean, you've been all over the board. I mean, are you looking for average or are you looking for projecting going forward? We had a pavement condition study done, process of getting it to where it's average cost looking forward. I can give you what we have today, but I don't know going forward that those numbers are going to be the same. What specifically are you looking for? As we've received or what we're using for those costs?
That's a good question, and I may have to update the language in the form to reflect that. We're looking for current unit costs, whether it's per square yard or per lane mile, whatever the specific treatment is.
Recently, then.
What was that?
Bids we've received recently.
Bids you've received recently, yes. And then in DTIMS, those, as it projects out payment conditions based on different unit costs and treatments, it has an inflation adjustment factor that will hopefully reflect what they may cost in the future. So.
Any other questions? Thank you, Addison.
Yes, thank you.
Next is a report from Saxon on our active transportation plan.
As I brought up last month, we are undergoing efforts to update the active transportation plan, which will succeed the Connect plan that was adopted back in 2009. So committee members are invited to participate in a pair of public open houses that we're going to be hosting next month. Tables are going to be provided, so I'd like to get with you all individually. I'll be reaching out and trying to get a head count for who I can expect to attend that. We did one last year as well. We had some decent attendance from member jurisdictions, but I'd like to increase that next year. Had several members of the public that were asking questions about their jurisdictions that weren't able to attend. So hopefully we get some more attendance this year. Those open houses will be on Tuesday, May 6th at Confluence Brewing Company in downtown Des Moines from 6 to 8 p.m. And then on the consecutive Thursday, May 8th at Brightside Ale Works in Altoona. So we try and have one centrally located, one out in the suburbs. This will be something that we continue to do annually, but actually biannually. We'll have another one in the fall. So you can look for that one as well. And then a reminder, looking for updated trail and sidewalk data. So we will be performing a level of service analysis on both our bicycle and pedestrian networks for that active transportation plan update. So that trail and sidewalk data will be very important as we look to perform an accurate analysis of the networks. So please have that data updated by Friday, May 2nd. As we look to, but that data will also go into our data byte collection as well. And we'll be taking that off the middle of May. Also want to make you aware of the commercial real estate breakfast that's hosted by the Business Record and the MPO is a sponsor of. Thursday, April 24th at the Hilton downtown. Networking begins at 7 to 7:30. Program beginning at 7:30 to 9 a.m. Be looking to hear from real estate professionals in the metro on clean projects and planned projects that are happening all around the region. So it'll be a good network event there. So just want to make you all aware of that and invite you to that later this month. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
You have a legislative update.
Yes. Okay, we'll see. Start off with Future 435. Yesterday, there was a House Appropriations Subcommittee meeting about that bill, and that did pass out of the subcommittee, so that'll go to the full committee. So now in both chambers, we're waiting for the respective appropriations committees to take action on it. Sounds promising so far, but we'll count our chicken before they hatch. If you go to the next slide, just wanted to update you to kind of what we were talking about with some of the federal changes and how they're affecting us locally. As we've put together our unified planning work program over the last several years, there's been something called planning emphasis areas that we're required to put in there. This year, the website for the planning emphasis areas just disappeared, and Iowa DOT said, don't bother putting it in there. And it makes sense because a lot of those planning emphasis areas are things like climate change, Justice 40, complete streets, and so forth. So that kind of gives us an indication of where the new administration is going. So when we did our work program as a draft, and it'll come back for you as a final next month, we made sure to kind of scrub it of language that could be problematic, which is the advice we've been getting. If you go to the next slide, we mentioned the DC trip coming up here. Again, we'll be talking about a couple of key projects. Future 435 is one, but we'll also be talking about the projects that we just approved in the list, minus the one additional Clyde project. And then we also have meetings set up with USDOT, where we'll try to glean any information we can from them. That's something we haven't done in the past, but something new to hopefully make some good relationships, but also just learn what we can from what might be heading our way. So I think the final update I have also on the federal side, just the other day, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee opened a portal, website portal, to take suggestions on the upcoming reauthorization bill. This spring, summer, fall, they're going to be doing a lot of meetings and public hearings and so forth to start preparing for a reauthorization that will hopefully happen next year. That's usually wishful thinking. It usually has a couple year process to get developed, but if all goes well, it could be next year. But anyway, we'll send that out in the post-meeting email of where that link is, and feel free to share your thoughts with members of Congress of what you want to see in there. I think that's what I have.
Thanks, Dylan.
I guess I would open it up, sorry, real quick. I know last month we had a good conversation of other bills that people are seeing that might be affecting U.S. communities. If there's anything from the floor that you want to make sure is mentioned that we should be aware of or just want to share with others, by all means, feel free to do that too.
Thanks, Dylan. Next item is informational items. Do we want to make Addison read all of those?
Sure. There's a packet.
Okay, perfect. Other non-action items of interest to the committee.
I do have one quick one that I'll go through. Actually, if you want to go to the next slide, on April 1st, we had our certification review with USDOT. We did get some initial findings from Federal Highway just the other day, and I wanted to go through those real quick. The most important thing is there were no instances of non-compliance, so we are meeting all the federal requirements that are placed upon us. They did have a couple commendations. One of them was our ongoing relationship with DART and just the coordination we have, as you kind of saw exemplified in the multimodal economic impact study that we're doing together. The fact that the MPO gives DART funding on a regular basis is also a commendation that we seem to get every time we do this, because that's not super common around the country. And then our last certification, they said our website was kind of a hot mess and to clean it up, and we've done that, and they were very happy with the results of that. They did have some recommendations. The first one is kind of interesting. They said DART and the MPO should better engage with local land use efforts. So we'll hopefully learn more about what they mean with that, but just a heads up, we might be sticking our nose in there things a little bit more. I don't know. We'll see. They had some issues with the bylaws because the bylaws were created prior to 2020 census, and they thought it should be updated. These are just recommendations, not things we have to do, because updating bylaws in 20D are kind of an effort. Our long-range plan only projected projects for the next 10 years because we have to update the plan every 5 years, and it's difficult to project what projects are going to be needed 20 years down the road. But they said, yeah, a good practice is to do that though. So they said consider updating that. They had a couple of public participation related things, just demonstrating how we collect feedback, but they thought there could be more of a process documented of what we actually do with the feedback to acknowledge that we received it, demonstrate that we are doing something with it. So that was good feedback. They also identified some ADA. These aren't requirements, but they just said, have you done any ADA evaluations, or perhaps accessible are, the things we do are. So that's something we'll look into. I know communities have to do things like that, so we'll be reaching out for some best practices probably. And then they had a couple of tip related items, just better describing how the tip projects affect the performance targets that we set. They also had one that was specific to the DOT. The projects typically don't include phases. They just have a big project in there, and they had exception with that. So that's more of a DOT related feedback, but worth noting, I suppose. I think next month, I don't know if they'll come to tech and policy, but Federal Highway is planning to do a more formal presentation of the findings. So once we get that, we'll make sure to share it with everybody, and we'll invite them to present to tech if that's of interest too. That's what we have for.
Thanks, Dylan. Any other items from anybody?
Quick question. I noticed that there was a survey or query that was put out, I believe, by Fed Roundtable on locations that might be appropriate for turn restrictions, right turn on red restrictions. I just was wondering what is planned to do with that.
Yeah,
the background of that.
Yeah, so we sent that survey out last month, and are just looking for input. It's a prescribed safety countermeasure from the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, and was brought up by members of the Bike Ped Roundtable. So we just solicited some feedback on what intersections they may be having issues with, and then we just plan to provide that member jurisdiction to study on your own. Like, we're not looking to prescribe anything, or but making them known to member jurisdictions that, hey, these are problem intersections that bicycles and pedestrians have brought up, and want to make you aware of them and perhaps study them to possibly implement a no right turn on red restriction at those intersections.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? All right, with that, our next meeting's on Thursday, May 1st at 9:30 a.m. and we're adjourned. Thank you.